Welcome to CityMakers Voices, presented by the Wholesome Foundation. In this series, we sit down with the top minds shaping the urban environment. Our second episode is with Loreta Castro Reguera, the Mexico City architect designing public spaces that double as water infrastructure. She sits down with our host, journalist Nolan Giles, at the 2025 Wholesome Foundation Forum in Venice. Here, they discuss Mexico City's water problem, public space as infrastructure, and her vision for a water garden city. The architect starts by breaking down Mexico City's unique history.
When somebody decided to settle in the center of the lake, somehow issues started. And even though the first city, which was Tenochtitlan, was built very much thinking about the natural context and understanding how to build land with the silt from the lower part of the lake, and then building canals to somehow pulverize water when water grew, we have had a lot of different political periods, and mainly when the conquest, the Spanish conquest happened, and these Renaissance cities were put into all American settlements, with disregarding the context, which I think is the most important thing, disregarding the context and making one solution for all.
Which was
the grid. Problems started appearing because now we stopped being flood resilient. Mm-hmm. And the great solution was to, instead of build resiliency, desiccate the lake system. So now it's a city built in the center of a lake where water is not showing, and with an enormous drainage system that is in charge of draining that lake every day. And when rain happens, it's always insufficient. But it's not insufficient because it's not good. It's insufficient because of physics, because you cannot have a 7-meter pipe under every street of the city. It's one pipe, and this system that just becomes more smaller and smaller, and never sufficient for a flash rain, for a flash storm as the ones that are happening much more frequently every year now.
I think what I've learned talking to architects and developers about cities is they're never going to be as good as nature at dealing with nature, right? But some cities are better than others. And it sounds like Mexico City is maybe particularly bad as a place, the way it's set up now to deal with nature. And it sounds like a lot of your work is restoring a little bit of harmony into this urban fabric to deal better with nature. So am I correct, firstly? And secondly, where can we see that happening in your city?
Yeah, you're correct. We have thought a lot about this, thinking about both like large-scale infrastructures, nature-based infrastructures, and then the small-scale neighborhood-based infrastructural public spaces. And somehow we have decided to focus on that scale, on the neighborhood-based, because of many different reasons. But some of them, which the most important ones, have to do with how to implement the system. And obviously larger systems require a lot of budget and a lot of political will, whereas smaller interventions, more acupunctural things, do not necessarily require all that power to be implemented. But on the other hand, they are very powerful when they start working. And that's what we have seen. And somehow we started with a very, not super small, but in terms of scale, yes, it's a small intervention that was very hard to put up. But once it was there and it started working, it has informed every other one. So now it's us working in that sense, but also many other architects and urban designers that are putting up this type of solutions. And just to make it like very objective, it's how public space within its own means and by understanding the type of soil where it's placed and the type of topography, how can these public spaces become more than just a public space, natural infrastructure. So using what's there and the capacity of the ground and the capacity of the place itself to manage water without, every time we tried that and we have reached that, it's without any other technologies.
So what you're talking about is like a domino effect in terms of you create success in one smaller project in a city, and the domino falls in a good way, and it knocks the next one and the next one and the next one. What happened, I guess, at that level above in terms of like this the city government, I guess larger developers? When did you kind of see that this was working, that like this one small project was a catalyst for much more projects that were all improving the urban environment?
Yeah, so I have to, well, we built one first one, which was successful, but very controversial. Then we had a very good client in the federal government that was just trusting what we did, not necessarily looking into water management through public space, but he let us the opportunity to do it. And we did maybe 5 projects of the sort in different parts of the country. But when we really saw how this is becoming a positive domino effect was with our last project, which was not even government request. We were asked by a community to stop flooding in a road, the main road of the area, by not sending water to the drainage system, but by holding that water into the town. That was the request. And they gave us a site which was communally owned. And there we thought, okay, we can build obviously like a type of water retention infrastructure, but they also wanted that site to become a place for the community to become a community catalyzer or a place of reunion. So we decided to take that idea of sustaining water and keeping water and reusing that runoff water to also make a water feature for the community. So it became also a public pool, and there's also a communal kitchen and public toilets and showers. So in the end, this idea of retaining water also made it retaining water for people. And now it's a recent project, but it's been performing since last summer, where we had a very big amount of rainfall in all of the Valley of Mexico. And it's been very successful now. We know right now how much water we can keep through this system and how the flood is not happening anymore. But what's important there is that this community-based project that we thought was somehow private was obviously seen by the government. And last month, we just received a visit from the senator of the area coming to see the project because she was amazed that there was not a flood anymore in that road. And now they want to implement more of this type of projects.
So going back to the community coming to you, that sounds quite rare to me for thinking about architecture. Like I would love it if my whole neighborhood banded together and said, hey, we want to fix this issue and this issue. But I don't know, it takes a lot of willpower. And it's really interesting that this group of people identified the problem because they had to live with it, right? Mm-hmm. But then they saw the solution through your work. So what was that experience like?
No, it's been really interesting because the person that asked us is an architect and he knows about the work we do. So he was very specific on that. And that's obviously a very good way to begin. But then there's also a very important part that is when you are able to link with the cultural values of that community. And by learning the history of that town, which is a very ancient town, we realized that in pre-Hispanic times, it was one of the centers for worshiping the god of water. So these people have always had a relationship with water in terms of a deity, not of, obviously, we all have a relationship with water, but in terms of worshiping water. And as it's in a hillside close to what were the lakes, they always had water springs, and they were used to swimming in these water springs. So in the moment where we said, okay, we're gonna not only retain water for flood control, but we're also using these old thing that you had that now you don't have because the lake got desiccated, of bringing water bodies into the public realm. They were all quickly relating to it. Very luckily, because we had also a group of elderly in our community engagement process. So they were, oh yes, like we used to swim like that, and so in that sense, the story or the project engaged very well with the complete chain of events that the town has been going through. So I think what's really nice is when you realize that the project you are building is not a project coming out of nowhere, but how the project becomes one more link in the chain of history, right? And how that just follows the line, but the line that you want to follow, obviously, because we could have also followed the line of piping and throwing water away, but we decided to engage with the line of tradition, culture, water management, nature, restitution. And it was beautiful. They even made like a ceremony about water and how this would bring a lot of fortune to the agriculture land around the place. So somehow the whole community embraced very deeply the project, and that's so rewarding. When you see that happening, you understand that you're just a tool in a line of history in a place.
So cool. So what kind of needs to happen for communities like this to really think seriously about fixing issues in the city? Because what you've done here in this one particular area is amazing and will have a long-term effect, but there are lots and lots and lots of these little areas. So like what's your advice? Is it kind of the mayor's job to congregate these people and really inform them of what's going on? Is it the local architects who need to be thinking more local all the time and really trying to think about their surrounding neighborhood as opposed to, I want to have a big project and be celebrated in the media? Is it a combination of all? Like, what would you say really are the factors that help community understand the problems and fix the problems?
When the community is suffering a flood or when the community suffers an earthquake, they are all very prone to receiving solutions. So that's not the best way things should happen, but it's obviously a way. And that's on one hand, but also how you talk to people. I think in the end, it's about understanding each other, no? And obviously there's always a political thing there that maybe that's when there's a clash, when one party wasn't something and the other is something else. But that's where I think the role of the architect becomes important. When you're able first to integrate someone that knows how to do community management, because we do community management as architects, obviously, but there are experts on this that can help you and guide the process. So that I think is very important. And then to be very close to the people that will be using these places and to really put yourself in their shoes and understand what's the difficulty for them, no? Like right now, for example, we're working in a small neighborhood where they flood every year at least once. And they continue, the insurance company just restitutes whatever got damaged, but the next year they will have to restitute it again, no? And then I was thinking, what if we just raise their homes? We don't make them retreat. We don't make them retreat because they have made the place their own, but we make them understand through architecture, like how architecture can become the element that helps their own homes not have this issue of that being damaged every time. So what about raising their homes where they are already? No? So, and I think those type of ideas, when you start linking, you will not have to move. It's only moving up, not elsewhere. What about that? And where would you put the car? Like there are then all the practicalities that you need also to discuss. But I think really getting in touch, listening is super important, and not being the one that imposes the solution, but really trying to bring up the solution together, no? And there are obviously some technical solutions that the community will never bring because they are not specialized, and those are the ones that why we are hired, right? But many others, which is the daily use, the type of program they need, how they walk throughout the neighborhood and so on, can be or should be brought by the community itself. And in the end, it's a group work.
Sure. Finally, what do you see as the biggest opportunity in cities for your profession? In terms of positives, like there are problems and then there are solutions. What are the opportunities for CityMakers?
Well, I don't know in general. I can speak about my own city, and I think about Mexico City as the best ground of opportunity in terms of design and urban design. It has always been a beautiful city. At some points, there have been some decisions that maybe weren't the best, but in my very particular point of view, I see Mexico City as a garden. It was conceived as a garden, and I still see that potential of Mexico City being a garden. And actually, everybody in the city loves gardens, and we have that in our DNA somehow. As I was telling you about that town with water, this idea of the garden, of the water garden, is so embedded into the city that I think, like little by little, it will become that garden, water garden city.
Amazing. Thank you so much.
Thank you to our guest, Loreta Castro Reguera, for joining us on this episode of CityMakers Voices. CityMakers Voices is brought to you by the Wholesome Foundation. It was produced by Nolan Giles and edited by Paige Reynolds, with additional production from Andrea Poggiotto. Thanks for listening. The Wholesome Foundation is a non-profit organisation supporting CityMakers as change accelerators for sustainable construction. Find out more at wholesomefoundation.org.